we're joined now by Melissa Flournoy, the longtime Louisiana activist, former state lawmaker from the great city of Shreveport, and also she is joined by another person who calls Shreveport home. He didn't grow up in Louisiana, but he's been in Shreveport for a long time, and John Milkovich was elected to the state senate a few years back. He served one term as the most conservative member of the legislature as a Democrat. He's since left the Democratic fold and has some thoughts about where we are in Louisiana, as does Melissa Flournoy, and their views are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And we're starting with state items. Governor Jeff Landry has issued an executive order meant to restrict what Louisiana schools teach about racism. It's the latest instance of Governor Landry leaning into the national culture wars over what students should learn about race, sexuality, and gender. In this order, he has instructed the state superintendent of education, Kate Brumley, to get rid of any policies that promote divisive concepts, including the idea that anyone based on their race or sex is inherently racist or sexist or responsible for historical wrongs. I think we have, from our newsroom at the Louisiana Radio Network, a couple of cuts related to this. And let's go, Robin and Renee, to Valerie Hodges of Denham Springs, a Republican who says Governor Landry is on the right track.
Is in some of the teaching material that I brought to committee and read it. And people had a hard time believing that it's in there, but it's in the teaching manuals. They don't need to be taught that they are hopeless victims or victimizers, or that they're oppressed or they're oppressors.
Okay, and Royce Duplessis of New Orleans has a different point of view.
I don't know that critical race theory is being taught in public schools, K through 12. I've always known critical race theory to be an advanced course that's usually taught in law school. Nobody's teaching kids based on their race that if you're white, then you're an oppressor, or if you're black or brown, that you're destined to be oppressed.
Okay, that's Royce Duplessis. Obviously, the battle lines are drawn, but the governor has the mojo. He was elected without a runoff by the citizens of Louisiana. And for those who say he didn't have a mandate, he sure did have a mandate, because people make a decision to vote and not to vote, and those who did vote gave him a majority without a runoff. I know that doesn't square well with you, Melissa Flournoy, but is the governor on track or off track with his move on this front?
Jim, it's just such a distraction. It's just silly. I mean, I think Jeff Landry wakes up in the morning and looks for silly things to talk about. You know, critical race theory is taught in law schools and graduate schools. It's about sort of the role of race in public policy and legal issues. And this is just such red meat to his base. It's a waste of time, and it's a fake controversy. And it just aggravates me that he's not focusing on issues that matter, like teaching kids to read and investing in K through 3 literacy programs. And supporting education. It's just more race baiting and red meat.
Now, he says teaching children that they are currently or destined to be oppressed or to be an oppressor based on their race and origin is wrong and has no place in our Louisiana classrooms. And he has
I agree with that. I agree with, part of the stuff that's in there. I don't think anybody's teaching kids that they are ultimately going to be oppressors or oppressed. I think this is just feeding a racist narrative that he's propagating.
Okay, John Milkovich.
And I think it's terrible.
Do you think it's terrible, John?
I don't think it's terrible that what he's doing, Jim, at all. And by the way, hey, Jim and Melissa, look, the fact of the matter is, and I was blessed to serve as vice chairman of the Louisiana Senate Education Committee for 4 years, which all that means is you can say what you think, but no one has to listen to a single thing that you say. But the fact of the matter is, the people of Louisiana, we're not in control of our education. There is already an agenda in education, and it's pro alternative lifestyles, it's pro abortion, it's pro socialism. It is the Common Core agenda, which was engineered in large part by Bill Gates, who's one of the largest financiers in world history of abortion. And when I was on the Senate Education Committee, I looked at the text that we were given to our children. I'm not talking about middle school or high school. I'm talking 1st to 5th grade. You cannot believe it unless you've seen the books. I have. And we had in those texts that we were given from 1st to 5th graders references to rape, mutilation, suicide, adultery, war, pillaging, torture. And this is the point. We are the people of Louisiana. Our education, we pay for it. It's our kids, it's our teachers, it's our principals. We should be controlling the content. Of course, that's the battle I've been fighting and kind of been losing for about 10 years. We are not in control of the content of the education of our children. And there's already an agenda. So to say that Jeff Landry is imposing an agenda is 180 degrees wrong. Couldn't be more wrong. There's already an agenda. We need to get rid of it. In fact, I would have gone further than Jeff Landry. I don't think we need Common Core, period. And I don't think we need Bessie board members. He appointed one. I disagree with that. That helped jam Common Core down our throats. I think our education should reflect our values. That would be Christianity, patriotism, and honor, Bible values. Go ahead and call me old school. I don't think there's anything wrong with our students being taught right.
All right. Well, let's get Melissa to, you gave her a lot to chew on.
Yeah, well, let me just back up. Let's say dial it down and let's focus on reality, okay?
Well,
in Louisiana, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Superintendent of Education have been dominated by Republicans, starting with Bobby Jindal. Okay, so let's go back. We're now 16 years later, 20 years later into Republican control of K through 12 education in Louisiana. Fact. The only agenda in public education in Louisiana is around the privatization and charter schools, okay? Republicans have controlled the curriculum development at Bessie and the Department of Education for 20 years. All right. And we have a set curriculum that's approved through an extensive process. And let's just be real. The only agenda in education in Louisiana is privatization, taking money out of private schools, funding charter schools, reducing quality education by not paying teachers. The problem in education is not CRT. It's quality teachers and lack of investment in K through 12 education. The rest of this is just smoke and mirrors.
John?
Absolutely. Well, you are right about one thing. There was a bunch of rhinos that bought in on our Common Core, and one of them was Bobby Jindal, who is now, by the way, affiliated with the World Economic Forum and Klaus, whatever his name is, people who want the globalists. But I actually fought Democrats and rhinos, and in fact, I probably had to fight the rhinos hard.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll return with Milkovich and Flournoy.
About reality.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. Vice President Harris and her Democratic presidential running mate Tim Walz are kicking off a bus tour of Georgia today. They're starting in Savannah. Tomorrow, Harris and the Minnesota governor will be speaking to CNN, and Harris's first extended interview since she replaced President Biden atop the ticket. NPR's Domenico Montanaro says the Trump campaign and groups affiliated with his Republican presidential bid have been spending more on ads in swing states since Biden ended his re-election bid.
In just the past month, the two sides have spent $500 million on campaign ads, most of that to try and define Harris in the eyes of swing voters. And with Harris taking the lead in recent polling in the blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and closing the gap entirely in the Sunbelt states of Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina, Trump allies are now outspending Team Harris in 4 of the 7 states. The most money has been spent, not surprisingly, in Pennsylvania, $100 million overall, followed by Michigan and Georgia, and even North Carolina, where Trump had a fairly significant lead against President Biden, is now starting to see a significant investment. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
Nearly a dozen states in the U.S. are under heat advisories today. The National Weather Service says Washington, D.C. could reach 100 degrees this afternoon. This is NPR News. The federal government says ongoing supply chain issues are delaying food distribution to some communities in the U.S., including indigenous tribes. Yvette Fernandez with the Mountain West News Bureau says the delays are prompting emergency grants to be issued.
To address the lack of food access caused by supply chain issues, some communities like the Navajo Nation will receive over $5 million to obtain food locally. Spokesperson Justin Ahostin says the Navajo Nation plans to use the emergency funds to create more farming opportunities to promote food resiliency and a more traditional diet.
Part of the commodity food program, a lot of the food that's provided or was provided previously was just full of preservatives, maybe not the most healthiest thing that you were eating. So we're really trying to change that dynamic.
The tribe says when their local farming effort is fully functional, the Navajo agriculture production effort will be able to provide food delivery for nearly 50,000 residents. For NPR News, I'm Yvette Fernandez in Las Vegas.
The automotive experts at Edmunds are out with their list of the 5 biggest mistakes people make when buying a new car. Number 1 is trading in a vehicle when you still owe more than it's worth. Another is going to just one dealership before making the purchase. Stocks are mixed on Wall Street. The Dow is up 6 points. The Nasdaq is off 54. I'm Dave Mattingly in Washington.
This is Jim Engster. You are listening to Talk Louisiana, produced today by Renee Martin and Robin Dow, and your number 877-217-5757. We're visiting with Melissa Flournoy, the former state lawmaker from Shreveport, and John Milkovich, former state lawmaker from Shreveport. That's about all they have in common. but they're both passionate, very passionate, and surprisingly, they seem to get along okay with each other, and we hope that you'll be cordial to our callers, or to our guests, if you are a caller. And again, it's 877-217-5757. We were talking.
Jim, can I follow up on one thing about critical race theory? Okay, I think that the governor and the legislature needs to read an article called "Toward a Critical Race Theory of Education." It's one of the seminal pieces on critical race theory. And do you know who wrote it, Jim? The president of LSU, William F. Tate IV.
Who now has backed off. He's backed off.
And he's a critical race scholar.
I know he is, but he got rid of the DEI at LSU on the eve of Governor Landry taking office.
I know. There's in the book on tyranny, it's called Obedience and Abeyance. It's sort of like it's like you are doing this stuff, sort of backtracking in order to avoid, losing your job, essentially. But it's actually a really interesting article that explains some of the background on critical race theory. And so, John Milkovich, I will send you this article if you will send me the information on curriculum in the K through 12 program, because I really do believe facts matter. And we do need to know what we're talking about. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, let's get Senator Milkovich to respond. John, did we?
I'm sorry, Melissa. I do want to respond, and I am talking about facts. I'm talking about texts that I read myself. The Boys' War. This is what we gave to kids in the 5th grade when I was still in Louisiana Senate. Intestines hanging out of dead soldiers, ripped flesh, eyes punctured, severed arms and legs. In 4th grade, we got Gifts of the Goddesses that included references to goddesses of vengeance, snake about their waist, serpents twined in their hair, blood dripping from their black eyes. Woods Runner, 4th grade, man's head eeten by a bear, murdered people that seem like trash, paper cloth.
Okay, I think we get the idea, John.
Okay.
Let's give this a break. I don't think this is going to be a productive conversation based on where it's going. But
if you have
69 days away from an election, and these issues that are permeating in the state are often displayed in full bloom on the national stage, and we are in a case where we have 2 candidates who are partisans. Donald Trump has had an evolution philosophically in his life, and he's gone from a liberal Democrat to a conservative Republican, and now, of course, he's now trying to go back to his liberal ways on abortion, but it's probably too late. I know that's your big issue, John. Do you think Trump is betraying the cause by saying that states ought to make their decisions and that Louisiana should stay out of the politics of California when it comes to abortion? Is President Trump on the right track, or has he betrayed you?
Okay, yeah, several questions. But I'll say, yes, he is on the right track. I will say, for the record, I am more extreme than Donald Trump on pro-life. I think every human life from the moment of conception is human life, which should be respected by man. We're made in the image of God, and God values human life, so should we. I'm against abortion, period. I do think it's a right step for Donald Trump to place this issue in the states. And it was a centerpiece of his theology and philosophy, and he did it. You got to give him credit. He's the one that appointed justices to the Supreme Court who had concern for unborn babies. And honestly, I think it's a philosophical non sequitur for us ever to say, I'm for the future, I'm for kids, I'm for hope and joy and all these things that some of the Democrats say they're for. And let's start with killing babies. And by the way, let's go ahead and emotionally and psychologically camouflage it. We're going to go ahead and call that, instead of killing unborn babies, we're going to call it reproductive freedom. And
well, he tweeted the other day that he's going to be the greatest president ever for reproductive rights. And if you believe that abortion is killing babies, how can you ever sanction it? How can you ever say California has the right to say that they want to have women make the choice rather than their lawmakers?
So if he said that, I disagree with it 100%, because I'm for God before I'm for Donald Trump, and I'm for unborn babies because God is. But I will say this. I'm not just looking at a single statement that someone says in a 24-hour news cycle. I'm looking at actions, what people have done, and what they've actually performed. And what he did is he helped get 3 pro-life justices on the United States Supreme Court who finally had the courage, along with Alito and Thomas, to say, look, America no longer, and we'll give Roberts credit, I don't often, America no longer needs to be a slaughterhouse for
all right, let's get Melissa's view on this. I think she has a different point of view. Melissa?
I think she does.
Dr. Flournoy?
Listen, there's way too much heat around this conversation. It's not about being pro-life. It really is about how do we control women and their reproductive health. And if you're really concerned about unborn babies, then we need to be focusing on access to health care, contraception, and family planning. We need to be talking about educating young men. It takes 2 pieces of a puzzle to make a baby, okay? Part of what I'm worried about is this radical, what they call a radical pro-life agenda, is damaging women's health care. Look at what's happened to Nancy Davis and Caitlin Joshua, trying to having a miscarriage and being denied care. We have just lost our minds around this issue around health care. It's affecting the quality of care for pregnant women. Women can't even get a prenatal appointment until after 12 weeks because doctors are afraid women might miscarry. We have just gone way too far away from what we should be talking about, the rights of individuals to health care, the rights of women and men to control their own fertility, the need to educate people about contraception and family planning.
Right.
And so let's come back and focus on what we really need to be talking about.
We are 69 days away from the election, and there are other issues in play between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. 877-217-5757. Please be brief. We do have some folks waiting to talk with Senator Milkovich and Dr. Flournoy. Phil in Jefferson Terrace. Phil, you're on.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Flournoy. I'll do predictions. There are going to be hundreds of thousands of women marching, as they did in 2016, to protest those idiots.
All right, what's your question, Phil?
Smith case is going to be allowed to move forward because they're...
All right, that's not a question. Dan downtown. Dan, good morning. You're on Talk Louisiana. Hello, Dan. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning. Yes, Senator, is it of any concern to you that because the genuflect like the altar of Grove and Northwest, the supposedly pro-life Republicans would not vote even one cent in taxes for the education and health care of children who are born?
All right, I think that's a question that should be directed to both. John, is that... go ahead.
Thank you, Dan. Jim, and also I know Dan from personally. Listen, America is investing hundreds of billions of dollars in governmental programs for health, medicine, family planning. And look, at some point, we got to get back to basics. The government cannot raise the American family. Washington can't even balance their own budget, and we're going to trust the Washington, D.C. bureaucrats, which is a huge, what is there, hundreds of thousands of federal employees. We're going to trust them to know structure and direct and orchestrate what happens in American families. What about we get back self-reliance, self-independence, self-governance, and Bible values? I mean, we have God who gave us the word, and this is how you're supposed to act. And the notion that one more government program is going to be a fix. The more government programs we get, the further behind we are.
All right, let's Dr. Flournoy.
I have to agree with John that we should talk about parental responsibility and family rights and freedom. Okay, I believe in the freedom of family to raise their kids. I think there is an appropriate role of government. I think it all twisted up and wanting to throw rocks at each other. And one way I have raised Southern Baptists, but there are more religions than just Christians. And we have a multicultural, democratic country. And so I'm not saying that only focusing on the Bible from a public sector governmental response is appropriate.
All right, that remains you're on Dr. Flournoy, Senator Milkovich. All right, John, you interpreted the Bible literally. Some of those passages some might write.
Let me wonder let's talk about the whole Bible. The whole Bible includes the New Testament, which you will offer when Joe found out his wife was pregnant. The Bible says that being a just man is more merciful, not one to give his wife to punishment or humiliation. He decided to marry for the age. The Bible does not say the age is important. By the way, Jesus was born of the Holy Spirit, the overpower of the Spirit of God. So let's talk about the whole Bible. Not one phrase taken out of context. It is true. I'm glad you brought that point up. God does place a great emphasis on family unity and structure and integrity. That includes husbands and wives being faithful to each other. And guess what? What do we see? I mean, this is not high school social philosophy. This is Joe's Barnes and money. And I noticed.
We do have to take a break, so let's pause and hopefully we'll get to Beyond the Bible, which implores us to be like Jesus, which means we should be pressing our weight, guys, including you, John Milkovich. Back after
this is 89.3 WRKF at Baton Rouge Public Radio. Get regional news delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the newsletter at WRKF.org under contact.
Support on Louisiana is provided by our members and by Cashew Ewing Law Firm Baton Rouge, with former U.S. Attorney Don Cashew and former Assistant U.S. Attorney Lane Ewing. Cashew Ewing providing individual attention in federal criminal defense and complex injury cases. 650-7400. And by Fred Dent Wealth Advisors, offering wealth management and leadership for more than 3 decades. Dent Wealth Advisors is a registered investment advisor and fee-only fiduciary. For more information at dentwealth.com. And by the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation, supporting Louisiana agriculture and providing educational programs to instill an appreciation for renewable food, fiber, and fuel. Information is available at lfdf.org.
Join us for WRKF's Founders Luncheon on September 27th with Martin Barrett, the former news executive who led the Boston Globe's reporting on the Catholic Church abuse scandal. Reserve your place today at WRKF.org/event.
In celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, Red Magnolia Theater presents a live staged reading of Real Women Have Curves for Thursday, September 26th at 7:30 at Pelican to Mars. Ticket information at redmagnoliatc.org.
On the next Louisiana Considered, we discussed the new permitless constitutional carry law that took effect in July here in Louisiana that could have decreased rates of gun violence. Plus, the first game of the LSU football season is just around the corner, and new medical technology is set to make its debut. That's coming up on the next Louisiana Considered.
Today at noon on 89.3 WRKF Baton Rouge.
This is Jim Engster. Thank you for joining us for Talk Louisiana. 877-217-5757 is your number, and a few more minutes with Dr. Melissa Flournoy, former state lawmaker, and former state senator John Milkovich. We're talking national politics for a few more moments, and we are inside 10 weeks, and it is all but a dead heat, if you believe in polls, particularly in the swing states, all 7 of them within the margin of error. 877-217-5757 if you'd like to get in under the wire. James in Longview, Texas. James, good morning. You're on Talk Louisiana.
Well, good morning, all. Anyhow, one of your guests was saying that they're getting sick of people throwing rocks at each other, as am I. I was just wondering if more issues would be better solved at the state level to have people actually closer to the action and talking to each other. I know some things have to be federal, but shouldn't a lot more things be state?
All right. Dr. Flournoy, should we have states' rights?
I think we have an issue around tolerance and conversation and being able to deal with facts at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. So, yes, I think we're dealing with a lot of issues at the state level, but we've really got to start paying attention to how to have civil discourse and not just shout at each other. And so I think we're just way too ideological right now, and we need to focus on pragmatic solutions to improve people's lives. That's what I think we need to be focusing on.
Senator?
Of course, we need to decide things at the state level. And look, Jim, I'm probably the perfect person to generate a bunch of angry phone calls this morning because this is my firm conviction. If Donald Trump is in prison, I'm voting for him. I am a 2020 election denier. And Donald Trump, and I think it's important that we elect him as president so that we can preserve the state's rights. He isn't perfect. But he's against the isms. He's against communism, against Marxism, against socialism, against globalism.
All right. And Kamala Harris is for all those things?
Well, yes. Yeah, I think she is a sock puppet for the depth of the Democratic establishment, which is really the same thing as the globalist establishment, which is honestly, in terms of their impact on America, is a Marxist-Leninist playbook where they are trying to deteriorate or cause the disintegration of America.
Right. Well, let's get Melissa's take. I have a feeling she believes Kamala Harris is on the right track.
Well, I do feel like we need to be talking about a hopeful future for our country. And I do think that Kamala Harris and Governor Walz have a hopeful vision for the future to try and bring people together and not focus on a dark, dystopian, fascist, authoritarian future being promoted by Donald Trump and the billionaire class that wants to take away the freedoms of American citizens. So I think we're throwing around words way too much that nobody understands. And the bottom line is who's going to try and make our country better, who's going to help our kids, who's going to support our families, who's going to reduce crime, who's going to help people have a higher standard quality of life. And frankly, I think that is anybody but Donald Trump.
All right, final caller for John and Melissa. David in Atlanta. Please be brief, David.
Hello?
Yes, David, you're on.
Okay. Mr. Milkovich, I'm glad to hear you're a believer in the Christian Bible. Now, you just pointed out what you believe are shortcomings by Kamala Harris. Donald Trump mocked, ridiculed, gloated, and laughed at the disability of a New York Times reporter.
He did. What's your question, David?
Well, this is my question. Did Donald Trump behave as a believer in Jesus, or is he a heathen? And if so, why would you support a heathen?
Well, I'm not going to support him because he's perfect, because the only perfect man that ever lived got nailed to a cross. This is what we don't talk about. This is the things that Donald Trump didn't do. He didn't start wars for his friends to make money. He didn't have his political opponents or people that had information on him assassinated. He didn't participate in international drug rings. He didn't participate in terrorist attacks against America on American soil. And that's, by the way, I'm referring to 9/11. If you do the research on that, our top intel and government officials had scabs of warnings about that, did nothing.
All right, and that would be President Bush, not a Democrat. But Melissa, we'll give you the final word. John is obviously a passionate man, a sincere fellow, and I like him, but I don't agree with much of what he just said. But that's why we have you to counter him if you so choose.
Well, here's what I want to say. This election is consequential. It's about a vision for each community and each family. It's a hopeful vision for the future of our country. It's about promoting the rights of individuals to make their own decisions, to live their lives in freedom. Donald Trump wants to limit your freedom, and Kamala Harris wants to provide a way forward in the 21st century to improve the quality of life of all Americans. And so choose wisely. And Jim, thanks for the opportunity to be on today.
Well,
it's
an honor to speak with both of you, Senator Milkovich and Dr. and former state rep Melissa Portnoy. Thank you. And we're joined